Welcome back, guys. Jonathan again. We're still here with Nico, and Nico's going to talk to us about his experience in volcano monitoring and how basically how difficult it is. I guess it's the main point, I think.
Yeah, it is. So kia ora, everyone. So the ultimate goal as a volcanologist when you work in an observatory is to be able to accurately forecast eruptions. That's really what you want to be able to do that. And unfortunately, it is very difficult, and in most cases, very, very difficult and nearly impossible. So what we can do in a lot of cases, we can tell that the volcano is in a state of unrest, is restless. So this is how we actually we look at the symptoms. We know that the patient is a bit sicker, if you wish. It's a bit sick at the moment. The volcano is a bit restless. But the one thing that we still, in most cases, can't do is tell exactly when an eruption will be occurring. So if it was a patient, for instance, we would be saying, we know the patient is a bit sick, but we don't know exactly when it's going to cough. And the same is true for volcanoes in most cases. The smaller the eruptions, very often the more difficult it is to see them coming, if you wish. And the reason for that is because small eruptions usually don't require a large amount of magma to come up, so they don't produce a lot of symptoms before they occur. And small eruptions, even if they are small, they still matter, because in most cases, like New Zealand, we've got people just going straight and enjoying the volcanoes, you know, going very close to the craters. So even a small eruption could have dramatic consequences because of the proximity of people to the volcanoes. So one day, hopefully, we're going to be able to successfully forecast all eruptions. That's what we're really striving to do. At the moment, we can tell when an eruption is more likely, and in some cases, we can try and forecast. But that's hopefully what the future will hold for us.
Awesome, Nico. I was wondering if you could maybe give us an example of eruptions that have happened in the past and how the monitoring around it went, and maybe some kind of experience like that.
Yeah. So there are some examples where a volcano has been acting for quite a long time, and the behavior actually has been well understood because it was repeated all the time. So there were examples, for instance, at Soufriere Hills volcano in Montserrat in the Caribbean, in the Eastern Caribbean, where at some point in time the volcano was so well behaved that it would actually show up hours before an eruption. You will have very specific signal that you could easily recognize, and you would know really easily that there might be an eruption happening over the next couple of hours. And it was amazing. pretty bang on, really, absolutely amazing. Problem is, volcanoes change through time, and then a few days later we started to lose all indications of impending eruptions anymore, and we couldn't see anything at all on the signal. So the only thing we could see was basically eruption happening without any precursory activity that we could recognize before that. So this is a good example of a volcano shifting behavior through time, going from something quite easy to manage and recognize to something being really difficult to manage.
Wow, I didn't even realize that it depends on what volcano you're looking at, but volcanoes themselves change over time.
Yeah, that's right. And there are some cases where if a volcano has been erupting repeatedly, you sort of have a bit of an idea about what to expect in terms of signal. But some volcanoes have not been erupting for hundreds of years, even thousands of years sometimes. So you're going there as if you start to see some earthquake activity around that volcano, if you start to see a bit of gas coming out, you really don't know what kind of sequence to expect. So, because you don't have the history for that volcano, you haven't seen it before. So what you do then is you look at other volcanoes which are as close as possible to that one there, so that you try to see, okay, if something happens, it's quite likely that it will look a bit like that other volcano for which we've got more information. So pretty much like looking at a patient, first-time sick patient, you look at other patients that have been sick and try to compare symptoms to make an assessment.
So an example of that in New Zealand, would it be comparing Ruapehu and Mount Taranaki, maybe? Is that a good comparison?
So it could be a good comparison. Some others might be actually even probably an even better comparison could be Mount Fuji and Taranaki.
Oh yes.
As a good example, volcanoes looking very alike, you know, brothers and sisters.
Yep.
Sometimes Tongariro, for instance, is a good example. We had the last eruption in 2012. We had two small eruptions, and those eruptions came after roughly 80 years of no eruptions whatsoever. So we didn't quite know what to expect in that space. But what we were trying to think, okay, what other volcanoes have been erupting like this after decades of quiescence? And you look in your country, but you look overseas as well. And there are a lot of similarities, for instance, between the Tongariro volcano in New Zealand, but also other volcanoes in Japan. So typically around Ontake, for instance, is a good proxy for those. So comparing volcanoes, eruptions, and precursory activity on those volcanoes is super important. And this is why it's great to work with colleagues from different countries working on different volcanoes, because then we can collate that knowledge and collectively get better with that understanding of what is possible on volcanoes.
Thanks. Wow, that's really eye-opening, Nico. Thanks for sharing your experiences with us.
Pleasure.